Americans aren't happy about the IRS scandal nor the handling of the Benghazi outpost attack, but neither issue is having much impact on President Obama's popularity, according to results of a new Wall Street Journal NBC News poll. Meanwhile, New Jersey Governor Chris Christie is one of the most popular politicians in America, thanks largely to popularity among Democrats. Patrick O'Connor joins us to analyze the data. Patrick, good morning.
Morning. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so let's start. Before we get to the analysis, what do the polls show about the IRS scandal, the Benghazi attacks, and President Obama's approval rating?
Well, basically they show a significant majority of Americans think that these scandals have undermined the honesty and integrity of the Obama administration, but they seem to make a distinction between the administration and the president himself, whose approval rating stayed basically flat with where it was from before the scandal. He remains a fairly likable figure. The noticeable drop-off is among independents on questions of whether or not he's a good commander-in-chief or he's trustworthy. Okay. So the president did get a little bit of, is tarnished a bit, but not as much as the rest of his administration is, at least in the eyes of Americans at this point.
Patrick, we do have results here for people from one of the first questions in our poll. Do these controversies, Benghazi, the Department of Justice subpoena of reporter phone records, and the IRS targeting of conservative groups, do those controversies raise doubts about the overall honesty of the administration? And yeah, they raise doubts, but 55 to 58% of people say so. But like you said, really President Obama is still hovering around just below 50% in terms of his approval rating, correct?
Yeah, he is. And I think the thing, he's had a pretty stark drop-off among support from independents, but the one thing that seems to be holding firm is that his core constituency, minorities, women, voters between the ages of 18 and 34, they actually seem to be more supportive of him now than they were from before the scandal. So as he's losing some voters, he seems to be attracting more. I think of those numbers that you've just ticked off for all the scandals, the one scandal that does seem to be the most resonant or have the most potential to harm the president is the IRS scandal. Because even there, you've had about 30% of Democrats who think that these investigations by Congress are totally legitimate. And there does also seem to be a huge portion of the population that's still kind of persuadable on this question. So as the investigation plays out over the next month, those numbers may shift a bit, whereas the Benghazi numbers really break along party lines.
That's interesting. And you mentioned a second ago that independents have actually changed their view a bit of the president, because so one reaction to this would be basically Republicans already didn't like him, Democrats already did like him, and nothing much changed. But it sounds like you're saying there's the opportunity that it might, that if something comes out, that you could get a much bigger swing in his approval?
What we're seeing is, more than a quarter of people on the IRS scandal haven't formed an opinion on it yet. And you actually have a much higher number of Democrats in the poll who suggested that they were that the whole scandal raised concerns for them. So I think there's more potential there. And I think, as you noted, I think the most troubling thing for the president in our numbers, and this is not just from this poll, but it's been a consistent trend all year, is that he seems to be rapidly losing support from independents. He lost them by about 5 points in the election. His approval gap is now about 31 points. So 31% more independents dislike him or disapprove of him now than they did when he was elected. And that's been a pretty steady erosion. And that's going to be hard for him to bring back. And you got to keep in mind, a lot of those independents are the same people that are going to be swinging the balance in congressional elections next year.
That's when he was elected to the second term or the first term, that 31% swing?
It's basically been since January. We've just seen a really noticeable decline. It's kind of been a straight line down.
Okay, let's, Patrick, let's change gears quickly to Governor Chris Christie. Very popular.
Very popular, and popular among all segments. I think the biggest problem for him is that he does almost as well with Democrats as he does with Republicans. In fact, I think he may even do better with Democrats than Republicans. So I think while that's a great thing for him nationally in terms of raising his stature, it may eventually prove problematic if he has to run through a Republican primary, but we're a long way off from that. And Chris Christie, he remains the one guy who seems, actually, well, Hillary Clinton, but she's more polarizing. But Chris Christie really polls well across all segments of the electorate. Okay,
you anticipated my question. I was wondering, that popularity among Democrats, that's great nationally, but in a Republican primary, he's got to get through that first, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. And, one of the things we've seen since the election and his appearance with the president right on the cusp of Election Day when they were touring New Jersey after Superstorm Sandy is that you've seen the distrust from Republicans really spike. And I think even in this poll, they're not exactly his strongest demographic. And if he's going to run for president, they really need to be.
Okay, Patrick O'Connor, great stuff. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.